Stevie Lynn Allison Osborne was a young child born on April 28, 2017, in Kansas City, Missouri. She lived in the Northland area of the city, which is a suburban part with many families. At the time of the events in 2019, Stevie was 2 years old. She was known for her happy nature and enjoyed simple things like watching the movie Frozen, especially the characters Anna and Olaf. She also liked sloths, playing with her grandmother's cat named Charlie, and spending time with her cousins. Her life was typical for a toddler, filled with play and family moments. Stevie's family included her father, Gary Lee Osborne, and her mother, Abigail Jean Morris, who went by Abby. Gary and Abby met in 2013 and started dating soon after. They got married before Stevie was born. Abby worked as a critical care nurse at St. Luke's Hospital in Kansas City. She had plans to go to nursing school to advance her career. Gary held different jobs, such as working at Motion Industries and later at Unilever. He was involved in Stevie's life and provided support. The family faced challenges when Gary and Abby separated in September 2017, when Stevie was just 5 months old. This led to a custody arrangement decided in January 2018. They shared joint legal custody, but Stevie lived mostly with Abby. Gary had visitation every other weekend and one overnight stay each week. He also paid more than $700 each month in child support to help with Stevie's needs. This setup allowed Stevie to spend time with both parents, but it created some tension between Gary and Abby. Stevie's extended family played a role in her life. On her father's side, her grandmother Valerie, called Mimi, was close to her. Stevie had cousins she enjoyed playing with. On her mother's side, Abby's mother Mindy, grandmother Carol Dixon, and great-grandmother Virginia Seller were part of her world. Virginia often helped with childcare. These family members provided support and care for Stevie. In early 2019, Abby began a new relationship with Joseph Chilson, who was a classmate from high school for both Abby and Gary. Joseph, often called Joe, moved in with Abby and Stevie at the Wild Oak apartment homes in Kansas City. This change brought a new person into Stevie's daily life. Joe was around Stevie when Abby was at work. There were some signs of issues in the home. Reports later showed that Joe had a history of anger problems. Abby knew about some of these concerns, but continued the living arrangement. Family members noticed small things, like Stevie's health or behavior, but nothing seemed urgent at the time. Gary observed Stevie during his visits and noted she was generally well, but he was not aware of any major problems. The city of Kansas City has services for families, including child protection agencies. These were later involved. Stevie's story highlights how everyday life can shift suddenly. Her family remembers her as a loving toddler who deserved a full life. In the months before the incident, Stevie had normal toddler experiences. She learned to walk and talk, enjoying simple toys and activities. Her parents captured moments in photos, showing her smiling and playing. The custody agreement ensured both parents stayed involved, but communication between them was sometimes strained. Abby's job as a nurse meant long hours, so she relied on others for help with Stevie. Joe became part of that support system. Family gatherings, like holiday parties, were part of their routine. One such event happened just before the tragedy. This period in Stevie's life was one of growth and family bonds, but underlying issues existed. These would come to light later. The context of a young child in a shared custody situation is common, but in this case, it led to difficult outcomes. Stevie's birth brought happiness to her parents. They chose her name with care, including middle names Lynn and Allison. She was their only child together. Gary and Abby tried to provide a stable environment despite their separation. The community in Kansas City includes many resources for parents. However, not all families use them. In Stevie's case, the family managed on their own until the events unfolded. This background provides a clear picture of Stevie's life before the sad day in December 2019. It shows a typical toddler with loving family members, but also some challenges that families face. On December 23, 2019, Stevie Lynn Allison Osborne's last day began like many others. She was at home in the Wild Oak apartment homes in Kansas City, Missouri. Her mother, Abby, left for work that morning, leaving Stevie in the care of her boyfriend, Joseph Chilson. Earlier that weekend, Stevie had shown signs of not feeling well. On December 21st, Joe had texted Abby that Stevie was vomiting. The next day, December 22nd, Joe said Stevie tripped over the family dog and hit her head, causing some bruises. That evening, Abby hosted a Christmas party at the apartment. Family members attended, including Carol Dixon, Abby's grandmother. They noticed Stevie was not her usual self. She had visible marks on her forehead, ears, and neck. Stevie was vomiting a lot and felt warm. Some guests suggested taking her to a doctor, but Abby thought it was a stomach bug. Photos from the party showed Stevie's condition. Later that night, Abby and Joe had an argument that turned physical, but they decided Joe would move out soon. The next morning, December 23rd, Abby went to work. Around midday, Joe called Abby to say Stevie had fallen out of bed and was not breathing. Abby told him to call emergency services. First responders arrived at the apartment and found Stevie unresponsive. They noted she had marks on her body. They started life-saving measures and took her to Liberty Hospital. At the hospital, Stevie was in cardiac arrest and had no pulse for about 20 minutes. Doctors stabilized her enough to transfer her to Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City for special care. There, she underwent emergency surgery to relieve pressure on her brain. Sadly, Stevie passed away during the procedure. The discovery of the situation came when Joe called Abby, and then emergency services were contacted. No one else was in the apartment at the time. Abby rushed to the hospital after the call. Gary, Stevie's father, was notified and went to the hospital as well. The police began their work right away. The Kansas City Police Department responded to the call and started an investigation. They interviewed Joe and Abby at the scene and hospital. Detectives collected evidence from the apartment, including photos and items. They also spoke with family members who had seen Stevie at the party. The scene was the apartment where Stevie lived with Abby and Joe. It was a standard two-bedroom place in a complex. Stevie's room had her bed and toys. The condition of the scene showed no obvious signs of struggle, but the focus was on Stevie's injuries. Medical staff reported the case to authorities because of the nature of the injuries. An autopsy was performed on December 24, 2019, by Dr. Altaf Hossein at Frontier Forensics. The findings showed Stevie had injuries from impact to her head and other areas. The cause of death was listed as complications from head injuries, ruled a homicide. This meant the death was caused by actions of another person. In the days after, the family dealt with great sadness. Gary and his family held a memorial for Stevie. They remembered her happy times. Abby also mourned, but tensions grew between the families. The community in the Northland area was shocked, as such events are rare. Media coverage was limited at first. Local news reported the death as a homicide in March 2020, when police confirmed it. Outlets like KSHB and the Kansas City Star shared basic details, but not much more due to the ongoing review. The public learned about the case through these reports. The community response included support for the family. A GoFundMe was set up by Gary to help with costs. People donated and sent messages of comfort. Child Services became involved to look into the care Stevie received. Initial findings pointed to concerns about neglect. The Missouri Department of Social Services Children's Division started a review. They interviewed people and looked at records. Their report, dated March 26, 2020, found signs of neglect by Abby and abuse by Joe. Police continued to gather statements. Joe gave different accounts of what happened. He first said Stevie fell out of bed, but details changed. Abby said she was not home at the time. The aftermath affected everyone. Gary sought answers and justice for Stevie. He met with police and prosecutors. The family held private gatherings to honor Stevie. Her gravesite is in Gladstone, Missouri, where people visit to remember her. This period was hard for the community. It raised awareness about child safety. Local groups discussed ways to help families in need. The case highlighted the importance of reporting concerns early. Overall, the first steps in the investigation set the foundation for what followed. Evidence was collected and agencies worked together. However, challenges lay ahead as the case developed. The holidays made the loss even harder. Christmas came just days after, but celebrations were canceled. Family members supported each other through the pain. Stevie's story touched many, even with limited news. Podcasts later covered it to bring attention. This helped spread awareness. The initial police work included checking medical records and timelines. They ensured all details were documented. This careful approach was key in the early stage. In summary, the day of the incident and the immediate response involved quick action by emergency teams and police. The findings led to the homicide ruling, starting a path towards seeking answers. The case of Stevie Lynn Allison Osborne became cold due to a lack of enough evidence for charges at first. After the initial investigation, police had suspects but not strong proof to move forward. The death was ruled a homicide in February 2020, but no arrests were made. The Missouri Department of Social Services report pointed to issues, but criminal charges need higher standards. Suspects included Joseph Chilson and Abigail Osborne. Joe was the main person of interest because he was alone with Stevie when the call was made. His stories about the fall changed, raising questions. Abby was looked at for not seeking help sooner, especially after the party where Stevie was ill. However, prosecutors did not charge either. They said more evidence was needed to prove intent or direct action. Early efforts included interviews with family, friends, and witnesses from the party. Police reviewed phone records and texts between Abby and Joe. They also examined medical history for any past concerns. Challenges were many. Witnesses had different memories of events. The injuries could be explained as accidents by the defense. There was no direct witness to any harmful act. The dormant years started after 2020. The case was reviewed periodically by police, but no new leads came up. In 2021, Joe took his own life on January 6th. This event stopped the investigation. Police said his action was like an admission, but they could not charge a deceased person. They decided not to pursue Abby, closing the criminal part. From 2021 to 2023, there was little progress. Gary pushed for more action. He met with Clay County Prosecutor Robert Sanders. The prosecutor explained that being a poor parent was not a crime. Without clear proof of Abby's direct role, no charges could be filed. Gary felt frustrated but continued to seek ways to keep the case open. Reviews happened through child services. The DSS kept Abby on the Child Abuse and Neglect Registry. This affected her job as a nurse. She could lose her license if the findings stood. Abby filed a lawsuit in April 2020 against the Children's Division to challenge the report. The case went to a bench trial in March 2023. As of mid-2023, no decision was made. During these years, the family waited for updates. Gary started a GoFundMe to raise awareness. Podcasts like Suffer the Little Children covered the story in 2023. This brought public attention but did not lead to new evidence. The host spoke with Gary about the details and the lack of justice. No major progress occurred in 2024. More podcasts, like The Misery Machine, discussed the case. They noted no one was held accountable. The family marked anniversaries privately. Stevie's birthday on April 28th was remembered each year. Challenges included time passing, which made memories fade. Evidence like photos and reports remained, but no new tech was applied early on. DNA or other forensics were not key since the cause was impact injuries, not needing such tests. The case stayed dormant because the main suspect was gone and proof against the other was weak. Police focused on other active cases. Community interest waned without news updates. Gary and his family advocated for change. They wanted better laws for child protection. This kept Stevie's name in discussions, but the case itself saw no movement. In 2025, a Facebook post on April 28th noted Stevie's would-be 8th birthday. It said the case had no charges and little media coverage. The family continued to hope for justice. These years showed the difficulties in child cases. Without clear evidence, they can stall. The lack of progress left the family without closure. Reviews by victims' advocates helped Gary, but no results came. The lawsuit by Abby remained unresolved, adding to the delay. Overall, the cold case years were marked by waiting and small efforts to keep attention. No big changes happened, leaving the case open but inactive. The community sometimes discussed similar cases, raising awareness. However, for Stevie, justice seemed distant. This period highlights how cases can go cold despite initial work. Families like Gary's face ongoing pain without answers. There has not been a major turning point in the case of Stevie Lynn Allison Osborne using new technology or a special unit. The investigation stalled after Joseph Chilson's death in 2021. However, some developments brought attention, like the Department of Social Services report and public discussions through podcasts. These did not lead to charges, but kept the case in view. The DSS report in March 2020 was a key document. It found preliminary evidence of neglect by Abby and abuse by Joe. This was based on interviews, medical findings, and timelines. It pointed to Abby's failure to get medical help for Stevie when symptoms showed at the party. For Joe, it noted his care when the final incident happened. This report was not criminal evidence, but helped in administrative actions. In 2023, podcasts provided a form of breakthrough in public awareness. Suffer the Little Children released an episode with Gary. He shared details about Stevie's life and the investigation. This led to more people knowing about the case. A mini-sode update discussed the bench trial in Abby's lawsuit. The lawsuit itself was a development. Abby challenged the DSS findings to remove her name from the registry. The trial on March 7, 2023, before Judge Timothy Fluke, included evidence from both sides. Witnesses testified about the events. As of 2023, no ruling was made. This process re-examined the evidence, but it was civil, not criminal. No new interviews with suspects occurred after 2021, since Joe was deceased and Abby was not charged. Police did not re-interview others. Inconsistencies in Joe's statements were noted early, like changing details about the fall. Abby's accounts were consistent, but questions remained about her choices. Forensics played a role in the initial autopsy. Dr. Hossain's report detailed the injuries without graphic terms. Advances in forensics, like better imaging, were not applied later because the cause was clear. No DNA tests were needed, as the case was about care and actions, not identity. New evidence did not link anyone further. The report and statements were all that existed. Police said Joe's suicide closed the main lead. They did not find new items or witnesses. Gary's efforts were a personal breakthrough. He spoke out to seek justice. Meetings with the prosecutor highlighted the gaps. The prosecutor said evidence was not enough for charges against Abby. In 2024, more podcasts covered the case, noting no accountability. This public pressure could lead to reviews, but none happened. The family hoped for a cold case unit to look again, but Kansas City police did not assign one. Potential for new tech exists, like digital reconstruction of events, but not used here. The case relies on witness statements and medical reports. The bench trial brought old evidence back. It included the autopsy and DSS findings. If the judge rules against Abby, it could affect her life, but not criminally. Inconsistencies in re-interviews were not present, as no new ones occurred. Early ones showed differences in timelines from the party guests. Overall, the case lacks a traditional breakthrough. The DSS report and public attention are the closest, but no arrests followed. The family continues to wait for any new step. This situation shows how some cases stay cold without new tools. For Stevie, justice remains pending. The impact of podcasts is notable. They reached listeners who supported the family. This could encourage tips, but none came. If a cold case unit reviews it in the future, new methods might help. For now, no such action. The section focuses on the lack of breakthrough, as facts show. The case needs something new to move forward. There have been no criminal charges or arrests in the case of Stevie Lynn Allison Osborne. The investigation ended after Joseph Chilson's suicide in 2021. No grand jury was called, and no indictment issued. Abby was not charged, as prosecutors found insufficient evidence. The legal steps were limited to administrative actions. The DSS report led to Abby being placed on the registry. She filed a civil lawsuit in April 2020 against Jennifer Tidball and the Children's Division to challenge this. The lawsuit went through court processes. A bench trial happened on March 7, 2023. No jury was involved. Evidence included the report, testimonies, and medical findings. The judge has not ruled as of 2025. The motive for the events is not clear, as no trial happened. Evidence suggests possible neglect or accident, but the homicide ruling points to actions causing injury. No criminal trial occurred. If one had, arguments would focus on responsibility. The prosecution might say Joe caused the injuries, and Abby failed to protect. Defense would argue accidents and lack of intent. Challenges include old memories and evidence gaps. Time has passed, making details harder to recall. No direct proof exists. The civil lawsuit is the only legal action. It aims to clear Abby's name for her career. The outcome could remove her from the registry. Without criminal resolution, the family has no closure. Gary seeks other ways, like advocacy. This lack of resolution highlights system issues in child cases. Evidence thresholds are high. The section notes the absence of typical legal steps. The case remains without charges. There is no verdict in the case of Stevie Lynn Allison Osborne, as no trial took place. No sentencing occurred. The civil lawsuit awaits a decision.